Then let me just start by saying, I don't think the Asteroid Sanctuary decks were a cheap way to win. I think you're cheap. Okay, so we have some news here. Well, it's more like a theory than really news, but there's a potential possibility that Mara Jade might come back into the Disney canon. And this could be exciting if they do it right. This is a story that's coming from inverse.com, and it's basically a theory. It says Rise of Skywalker theory. Mara Jade in Mandalorian sets up Palp's return. Now, this is just a theory, so, but I guess there's some indication that there's a distinct possibility. So it's the Emperor's Hand, and Luke's long-lost wife is rumored to be returning to canon. Will it change the last Skywalker film? If you remember playing Decipher's Inc. Star Wars customizable card game back during the turn of the century, then let me just start by saying, I don't think the Asteroid Sanctuary decks were a cheap way to win. I think you're cheap. Okay. Now that that's out of the way, he had a lot on his chest there. Remember when Star Wars was loosey-goosey, that's Luke Skywalker's sworn enemy, sometimes girlfriend, mother of his child, existed in Star Wars canon because of comic books, trading cards, and novels. The first time we saw Mara Jade was Heir to the Empire, the Timothy Zahn trilogy, the Thrawn trilogy. And she is a fantastic character. I mean, she's one of, I think she's universally accepted as one of most Star Wars fans, one of their favorite characters, specifically EU characters for sure. Back then, actress Shannon McRandall was the face of Mara Jade for the Star Wars card games, and while there's no reason to believe McRandall herself will return to play Mara, we're all suddenly wondering if the most famous EU/Legends character is returning to canon. Certain comments suggest that Mara Jade could appear in The Mandalorian. But what would that mean for the Rise of Skywalker? In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Jon Favreau responded to a question on whether or not Mara Jade could appear in The Mandalorian by saying, quote, I don't want to talk about anything that might be fun for people to discover. Okay, so this is by no means a confirmation that Mara Jade could suddenly be recanonized, but because it wasn't an outright no, it's exactly enough to get everyone excited. And, of course he's not going to really indicate either way, but he didn't just turn it down, shoot it down immediately and say, no, that's not going to happen. Or, by saying something like that, by phrasing it, saying something like, I don't want to talk about something that could be fun for people to discover. That kind of, I would say, gives you an indication that there's a possibility that they might have something in store for Mara Jade in the Mandalorian show, which I believe premieres somewhere around the end of November, 20-something, I think, of November on Disney+. Okay, so let's continue here. Previously, the creator of Mara Jade, novelist Timothy Zahn, had suggested he didn't think there was a way for the character to return to canon, even though Grand Admiral Thrawn, who originated in the same book, Heir to the Empire, has been reintegrated into official lore. You may or may not know, they brought Thrawn back in the series Rebels, which was a very nice way of doing it. His time period, they changed it a little bit from the original, the Thrawn, the Timothy Zahn Thrawn novels, where he appears 5 years after Return of the Jedi. They brought it back into the prior to A New Hope time period. But I thought they did, Filoni did a great job bringing him in. I liked his storyline. I liked where it left off because it leaves a lot to be explored there. I think, we could also talk about the possibility of Ahsoka, Thrawn, Ezra all being brought into The Mandalorian as well, because that will take place about the same time period. The Rebels ended off, it ends off with a voiceover that extends through Return of the Jedi. So they all survived. You see Ahsoka and Sabine going off to find Ezra in the Unknown Regions. The Unknown Regions where Snoke is from. The Unknown Regions where allegedly, according to leaks and spoilers for Episode 9, this is where Palpatine has been residing for the last 30 years, somehow building his Sith fleet, the Sith Empire. So, this could all tie together into The Mandalorian, and having Mara Jade somehow be a part of this. I don't think if they did bring her in, I don't think they could do, well, they couldn't do the original storyline from her, because that wouldn't, well, I guess they technically could, although the Emperor never really died. It'd be interesting to see what they do. She was a smuggler originally, so it would fit with the Mandalorian storyline, but let's continue here. Okay, so it says, so for now, just to be clear, there's no actual news that Mara Jade is back, but the character did appear in The Mandalorian. If the character did appear in The Mandalorian, it would work really well with the timeline, and it could feasibly set up the return of Emperor Palpatine in the Rise of Skywalker. In 1991 novel The Heir of the Empire, Mara Jade was a cranky former spy who had worked for the Emperor as an assassin. Her title was the Emperor's Hand, and her job was to kill Luke Skywalker. Mara was not a Sith, but she was trained to use a lightsaber. She was a Force wielder. And eventually she would turn to the light side of the Force and end up marrying Luke Skywalker. But before that, she was basically the most covert, secret badass in the entire Empire and 1,000% loyal to Emperor Palpatine. Right now, Mara Jade isn't canon, but if she were rebooted, her existing backstory would place her in the perfect position to put events into motion that could help bring Palpatine back to life. The Mandalorian introduces a young, post-Return of the Jedi Mara Jade, if The Mandalorian does this. Perhaps it could hint at the idea that she's working on a super secret side gig that involves bringing her old boss back to life 30 years in the future. The timelines of the characters match up. The legend canon Heir of the Empire took place 5 years after Return of the Jedi. And The Mandalorian also takes place 5 years after the Return of the Jedi, so the time periods would match quite nicely. If you're one of those people who gets in arguments about 1999, about weird rules in Star Wars card games, you know the answer. She's a freaking smuggler. Yes, see, it would fit because The Mandalorian is going to, as it says here, the entire show is set to deal with bounty hunters, thieves, all sorts of wretched hives of scum and villainy, and, obviously the smugglers would fit perfectly into that as well. And then it goes on to saying how, it doesn't have to fit into, like, the original canon. She doesn't have to be Luke's love interest. The character could change a little bit. Although I think it would be interesting if, I don't know, they're not going to bring Luke into The Mandalorian or any of that, but it would be interesting to, if they did kind of follow the original storyline, if Luke were to marry Mara Jade and they had the child they wouldn't be able to call him Ben, but, if they had a child at all, and when Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, falls to the dark side and takes out the Jedi Temple, that we see those kind of flashback scenes in A Force Awakens, it would kind of be interesting. I would believe it more that Luke went off to an island to kind of be secluded and, depressed if he had been married to Mara Jade and they had a child and Ben slaughtered them both. There's a lot of retconning there that they'd have to do in The Rise of Skywalker or subsequent material after that to believe that, but it would be more plausible, at least slightly more plausible. I still don't think Luke would ever give up like that. I just don't. That's not Luke. It's not his character. But based on what we have for Last Jedi, that would at least be a little more plausible to believe that Luke was so depressed he had to get away, he had to leave, he was trying to find more information on the Force, whatever you want to say. But it would be, I don't know, I'd buy it a little more if he had been married to Mara Jade, they had a child, and Ben slaughtered them all. I don't think they're going to do that, but just an idea. Anyway, this is talking about the fact that she wouldn't have to be Luke's, involved with Luke in any way. She could just be somehow a Force wielder that was a smuggler and is still trying to kind of bring about Palpatine's return. So it's an interesting idea. I think if you want to have a strong female character in Star Wars that everyone can get behind, other than Ahsoka, Mara Jade is a perfect choice. She's not the Mary Sue of Rey because we know her history, we know her training. She was a badass smuggler, assassin trained by the Emperor, later trained by Luke. there's a lot of love for this character, and I think it'd be a good idea to bring her into the canon. I hope Favreau and I know he worked with Filoni. I know he brought Lucas in to consult with Lucas for The Mandalorian. So I really hope that they are getting, they're receiving the fan feedback from what we've had so far with Disney Star Wars, and they're going to try to really work to improve on that. If anyone can do it, I think Filoni and Favreau, the two Fs, I think they're the guys that stand the best chance right now. So we'll see what happens. I thought it was an interesting article. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Would you be excited to see Mara Jade back in some way? Were you excited to see Thrawn back? I thought Thrawn was a nice addition. I hope they do more with him. Again, in The Mandalorian, it'd be a good place to maybe bring him back. But let me know in the comments down below, and like the video, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And until next time, lock the door and hope they don't have blasters.